desperate call in the middle of a disaster. A little girl's trembling voice saying two words that would change everything. What happens when a stranger answers an emergency call and discovers a connection he never knew existed? This is a story about courage, hidden truths, and the kind of love that defies all logic. Get ready for a journey that will make you believe in second chances. If you enjoyed this story, subscribe to the channel and type Amen in the comments. A beautiful piece of good news may come your way very soon. And don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. The rain had been falling for 3 days straight in the small riverside neighborhood of Millbrook Heights, turning streets into rivers and homes into islands of desperation. Almost 7-year-old Chloe Anderson stood waist-deep in murky water, her blonde hair plastered to her face, struggling to keep her balance as she pushed the makeshift bamboo raft forward. On top of the fragile structure, wrapped in fraying rope she'd found in the garage, sat her 3-year-old triplet sisters, Maya in a pink bunny costume, Ruby in a yellow duck onesie, and Iris in a purple unicorn suit, their identical faces streaked with tears and terror. It's okay," Chloe kept whispering, though her own voice trembled with fear she tried desperately to hide. "Mommy will find us," she promised she always would. But Mommy hadn't come back. Sarah Anderson had left that morning before dawn, trudging through ankle-deep water to Mrs. Patterson's house 4 blocks away to beg for food. They'd been surviving on donated canned goods and church charity for months. Sarah had kissed Chloe's forehead and promised to return before the girls woke up. That was 6 hours ago, and the water had risen with terrifying speed, transforming their humble street into a churning brown river that swallowed everything in its path. The almost 7-year-old's small hands were raw and bleeding from tying the bamboo poles together with wire and rope, pieces she'd dragged from their collapsed back fence after breaking the bathroom window to escape. She'd learned about rafts from a library book about Tom Sawyer that she'd read 5 times, because they couldn't afford to buy books. Chloe was extraordinary that way. She remembered everything she read, understood concepts far beyond her years, solved problems that stumped adults, and possessed a fierce determination that burned bright, despite her tiny, malnourished frame. The floodwater was numbingly cold, making her legs feel like heavy stones, but she kept pushing forward, one agonizing step at a time, pulling the raft bearing her baby sisters toward the hill she could barely see through the rain. Maya was crying softly. Ruby kept calling Chlo in that sweet baby voice, and Iris had gone silent, which worried Chloe most of all. She'd wrapped them as tightly as she dared in the rope, terrified they might slip off into the water and disappear beneath the surface before she could grab them. "We're gonna be okay," Chloe said again, more to convince herself than them. Her legs buckled slightly as she stepped into a deeper section, and panic flared in her chest. The water reached her chin for a moment before the ground rose again. She gasped, coughing, tasting the foul water. The triplets screamed in unison, a sound that pierced through the drumming rain. That's when Chloe remembered the phone. Her mother's ancient cell phone, the one with the cracked screen that barely held a charge. Sarah had left it on the kitchen counter that morning. Chloe had grabbed it during their escape, her almost 7-year-old mind understanding somehow that it might save them. She'd wrapped it in a plastic grocery bag and stuffed it inside her pink hoodie, praying it would stay dry. With trembling fingers numb from cold, Chloe managed to tie the raft's rope to a partially submerged stop sign. She reached inside her hoodie, felt the plastic-wrapped phone, and pulled it out with the careful reverence of someone handling something infinitely precious. The plastic bag had held. The phone was dry. Her fingers shook so badly she could barely unwrap it. The battery showed 5%. 5% to save their lives. She unlocked it. She knew her mother's password because Mommy had taught her in case of emergencies, and Chloe never forgot anything. And opened the contacts. There were only 7 numbers saved. Grandma Jean, who'd died 2 years ago, but Mommy couldn't bear to delete. Mrs. Patterson, the church, the food bank, Dr. Morrison at the free clinic, child services, and one contact simply labeled H. Chloe had never seen her mother call that number, had never heard her mention anyone whose name started with H. But just 2 months ago, late at night when Mommy thought she was asleep, Chloe had seen her mother sitting at their tiny kitchen table, staring at this contact on her phone, crying silently. She'd whispered, "I should call him. I should finally call him." before putting the phone down and going to bed. Chloe had memorized which contact it was, the way she memorized everything. Now, standing in the flood with her sisters' lives depending on her, Chloe pressed the contact labeled H and lifted the phone to her ear with both hands to stop it from shaking. It rang once, twice, 3 times. She was about to hang up when a deep male voice answered, sharp and professional. "This is Blake." Chloe's mind went blank for a moment. The voice was so strong, so confident, so different from anyone she'd ever heard in her neighborhood. It reminded her of the voices on TV, the ones that belonged to people in tall buildings and expensive suits. But she didn't have time to be scared. "Daddy," the word tumbled out before she could think, before she could process what she was saying. She'd never had a daddy, never even met the man who was supposed to be her father. But the word felt right somehow, felt like it might make this stranger listen, might make him care. "Daddy, we're in the flood. Our house is gone. Me and my sisters need help. Please. The water keeps getting higher and I don't know how much longer I can hold on." There was a long pause on the other end. Chloe could hear background noise, phones ringing, people talking, the distant sound of a helicopter. Then the voice came back, different now, urgent and focused in a way that made her heart leap with hope. "Where are you? Tell me exactly where you are right now." "Millbrook Heights," Chloe gasped, her teeth chattering. "Riverside Drive. The water's really high. I made a raft for my sisters, but I'm so cold and I don't know where Mommy went and—" "Stay on the line," the voice commanded. "Do not hang up this phone. What's your name?" "Chloe Anderson. I'm 6 and my sisters are 3. They're triplets, Maya and Ruby and Iris. Please hurry, please." "I'm coming, Chloe. I'm coming right now." "You're being so brave. Can you see any buildings nearby, anything tall?" Chloe looked around through the rain, squinting. "There's a church, the white one with the tall, pointy thing. It's on the hill. St. Michael's. I know it. Head toward that church, Chloe. Can you do that? Can you keep moving toward the church?" "I'll try," Chloe whispered. The phone battery was at 3% now. "But I'm really tired." "I know you are, sweetheart. But you're the strongest little girl I've ever talked to. You made a raft. You protected your sisters. You called for help. That's more than most adults could do. Keep that phone on and keep talking to me. Tell me about your sisters. What are they wearing?" As Chloe described the animal onesies through chattering teeth, something inside her chest loosened slightly. The man on the phone, this stranger she'd called Daddy without thinking, wasn't just listening. He was already moving. She could hear it in his voice, in the way he was giving orders to someone else in rapid-fire sentences between talking to her. He was coming. Someone was finally coming. The battery hit 1% as Chloe managed to move another 10 feet toward the hill where St. Michael's stood like a beacon. Maya had stopped crying and was just staring at the sky, rain falling on her small face. Ruby was singing a nonsense song she always sang when scared. Iris remained silent, which terrified Chloe more than anything. "Almost there, Chloe," the voice said. "I'm in the helicopter now, 15 minutes. Can you hold on 15 more minutes?" "I think so," Chloe said, though her legs were giving out. "But mister, the phone's gonna die." "That's okay. I'm tracking your location from this call. Even if it dies, I know where you are. You did everything right, sweetheart. Everything. Now I need you to tie that raft to something strong and hold on tight. Can you do that for me?" "Yes, Daddy," Chloe said again, the word feeling more natural now, feeling like a lifeline. She spotted a partially submerged metal fence post and used the last of her strength to secure the rope, wrapping it 3 times and tying the knot her mother had taught her. "It's tied. We're tied." "Perfect. Now hold your sisters and don't let go." "I'm almost—" The phone died. The screen went black. Chloe's heart plummeted, and for a moment she wanted to cry, wanted to give up, wanted to sink into the water and let it take her. But then she heard it. The distant thump, thump, thump of helicopter blades cutting through the storm, getting closer, getting louder. She looked up through the rain, and there it was, a massive black helicopter descending through the gray sky like something from a movie. Chloe grabbed her sisters, pulling them close on the raft. and started waving her free arm frantically. The helicopter circled once, and she saw a figure in the open doorway, saw someone pointing directly at them. They'd been seen. They were going to be saved. The stranger on the phone, the man she'd called Daddy, was keeping his promise. And as the helicopter descended and a rescue basket lowered toward them, almost 7-year-old Chloe Anderson allowed herself to hope for the first time in as long as she could remember that maybe, just maybe, everything was going to be okay. Harrison Blake had been in the middle of negotiating a $200 million merger when his personal cell phone rang with an unknown number. His executive assistant knew better than to let calls through during these meetings, unless it was life or death. He'd almost declined it, almost sent it to voicemail, but something made him answer. Some instinct he couldn't name, some whisper in his mind that said this call would change everything. He was right. The moment that small, terrified voice said, "Daddy," his entire world tilted on its axis. Harrison Blake, CEO of Blake Industries, worth $3.7 billion, owner of the penthouse suite in Manhattan and homes in 5 countries, had no children, had never wanted children, had built his empire specifically so he'd never be tied down by the responsibilities that had destroyed his own father. But that voice, that desperate, brave little voice saying those words, "Me and my sisters need help," triggered something primal in his chest, something that bypassed logic and activated pure instinct. He was standing before he realized he'd moved, was barking orders to his security team before his conscious mind fully processed what was happening. "Millbrook Heights is underwater," his head of security, Marcus, said grimly as they raced to the helipad on the roof of Blake Tower. "Emergency services are completely overwhelmed. The evacuation orders came too late. There are hundreds of people trapped." "There's a 6-year-old girl in that water who just called me for help," Harrison snapped, his voice cold as steel. "We're getting her out, now." The helicopter lifted off within 3 minutes, and they were racing toward Millbrook Heights. Harrison kept the girl, Chloe, on the line, kept her talking, kept her moving toward the church. Her voice was so small, so scared, but beneath the fear was an intelligence and determination that stunned him. This child had built a raft, had protected 3 younger siblings, had kept herself calm enough to make the call that would save their lives. When her phone died, Harrison's heart nearly stopped. But the GPS lock held, and within 15 minutes of leaving Blake Tower, they were hovering over the flooded street. There she was, a tiny blonde girl in a soaking pink hoodie, standing waist-deep in brown water, one small arm wrapped around 3 even smaller children on a crude bamboo raft that should never have held together, but somehow did. She was waving up at them with her free arm, and even from this distance, Harrison could see she was at the absolute end of her strength. "Get them up here," he commanded. "All 4 of them. Fast." The rescue basket went down. The pilot, Daniel, was one of the best, and he positioned it perfectly beside the raft. Harrison watched through the open door as Chloe, moving with the careful precision of someone much older, began loading her sisters into the basket one at a time. The triplets were screaming, terrified of the loud helicopter and the swinging basket. But Chloe kept talking to them, kept soothing them, even as her own body shook with cold and exhaustion. The first triplet came up, the one in the pink bunny costume, crying hysterically. One of the medics Harrison had insisted on bringing grabbed her, wrapped her in a thermal blanket. Then the yellow duck. Then the purple unicorn. 3 identical little girls with blonde hair and blue eyes, their faces pale with cold and terror. And then Chloe. The basket went down one more time, and Harrison watched as the almost 7-year-old tried to climb in and couldn't. Her arms wouldn't work. Her legs were giving out. She tried 3 times and kept slipping back into the water. And Harrison saw the exact moment she considered giving up, saw her small face crumple with despair. "No," Harrison heard himself say. "No, sweetheart, don't you dare give up now." He was moving before Marcus could stop him, clipping himself to the safety line, gesturing urgently for them to lower him down. The wind from the rotors whipped around him as he descended, and the rain was like needles against his face, but he didn't feel any of it. His entire focus was on that little girl who was losing her fight to stay above water. His feet hit the floodwater and immediately sank into unseen debris below. The current was stronger than he'd expected, trying to pull him away. but he pushed forward to where Chloe was clinging to the fence post, her eyes half closed, her lips blue. Up close, she was even tinier than he'd thought, impossibly fragile. And Harrison felt something crack open in his chest at the sight of her. "I've got you," he said, reaching for her. "I've got you, Chloe. You can let go now." Those blue eyes opened, focused on his face, and widened with something that looked like recognition, even though they'd never met. "Daddy?" she whispered through chattering teeth. "You came." "I came," Harrison said, and scooped her into his arms. She weighed almost nothing, this child who'd been so impossibly brave. She went limp against him immediately, all that fierce determination finally giving out now that someone else was there to carry the weight. "I've got you. You're safe now." He signaled for the basket, held Chloe tight as they were lifted together back to the helicopter. The moment they were inside, the medic wrapped them both in blankets and the pilot banked hard, heading for higher ground. Chloe was unconscious now, her small body shutting down from hypothermia and exhaustion. The triplets were crying for her, reaching out with tiny hands, and Harrison found himself moving to sit with all four girls, gathering them close even though he had no idea what he was doing. "Sir," Marcus said carefully. "Who are these children?" "I don't know," Harrison admitted, looking down at Chloe's pale face at the raw wounds on her small hands from building the raft. "But she called me. She called me and I came, and I'm going to find out why." They landed at Mercy General Hospital 15 minutes later. The emergency room was chaos. Dozens of flood victims being triaged, families searching for missing loved ones, medical staff running in every direction. Harrison used his name shamelessly to get the girls immediate attention, to get them private rooms and the best doctors the hospital had. The triplets were treated for mild hypothermia and shock, but were otherwise miraculously unharmed. Chloe was in worse shape. Severe hypothermia, exhaustion, malnutrition, infected cuts on her hands and feet. The doctor's face was grim as he delivered the assessment. "This child has been malnourished for months, Mr. Blake," Dr. Chen said quietly. "Maybe longer. These injuries on her hands are several hours old, but they're on top of older scars and calluses that shouldn't exist on a 6-year-old, and the triplets show signs of similar long-term neglect. Where are the parents?" "I don't know," Harrison said, and realized he was still holding Chloe's small hand even though she was unconscious, even though he had no right to be here. "The mother went out before the flood hit and didn't come back. I don't know about the father." "Child services will need to be notified," Dr. Chen said. "No." The word came out harder than Harrison intended. "Not yet. Give me 24 hours to find the mother. Please." Dr. Chen studied him with shrewd eyes. "You have no legal relationship to these children, Mr. Blake. I can't just—" "I'm the one they called," Harrison interrupted. "I'm the one who saved them. Their mother has my number in her phone listed as H. There's a connection here I don't understand yet, but I will. 24 hours. That's all I'm asking." After a long moment, Dr. Chen nodded slowly. 24 hours. But if the mother doesn't surface by then, I have to report this. It's the law. Harrison spent the next 6 hours sitting beside Chloe's hospital bed, while Marcus and his team worked to track down information about Sarah Anderson and her 4 daughters. The triplets had been moved to the same room after they wouldn't stop crying to be near their big sister, and now all 4 girls were sleeping in various states of recovery, looking impossibly small in the hospital beds. It was nearly midnight when Chloe's eyes finally fluttered open. She looked around the room in confusion, saw her sisters sleeping safely nearby, and then her gaze landed on Harrison sitting in the chair beside her bed. Recognition sparked immediately in those intelligent blue eyes. "You're really here," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I thought maybe I dreamed you." "I'm really here," Harrison confirmed gently. "How are you feeling?" "Tired, and my hands hurt." She looked down at her bandaged palms, then back up at him with sudden intensity. "Did you find my mommy?" Harrison's chest tightened. "Not yet, but I have people looking. Can you tell me about your mommy, Chloe? What's her full name?" "Sarah Anderson, Sarah Marie Anderson. She's really pretty and really nice, but we don't have a lot of money, so she has to work really hard." The words tumbled out in a rush, defensive and protective. She loves us a lot. She didn't mean to leave us in the flood. She was trying to get us food." "I know," Harrison said softly. "I know she loves you. I can see it in how brave you are. She taught you well." Chloe's eyes filled with tears. "I tried to take care of my sisters like she always tells me to, but I was so scared they were going to fall in the water and I wouldn't be able to save them." "You did save them," Harrison said firmly. "You saved all three of them. You're a hero, Chloe." "But I called you Daddy," Chloe whispered, looking down at her hands. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to lie. I thought if I said Daddy, you might care more, might come faster. I've never had a daddy. I don't even know who he is." Something in Harrison's chest cracked wide open at those words. This brilliant, brave little girl apologizing for calling him Daddy when she'd been in mortal danger. Apologizing for using the word that might save her life because she felt guilty about lying. "Don't apologize," he said, his voice rough. "You did exactly what you needed to do, and I'm glad you called me that. I'm glad you called me at all." "Why?" Chloe asked, those two old eyes studying him with unnerving intensity. "Why did Mommy have your number? Who are you?" "My name is Harrison Blake," he said slowly. "And I don't know why your mother has my number. But I'm going to find out. And until I do, until we find your mom and make sure you're all safe, I'm going to stay right here." "Is that okay?" Chloe was quiet for a long moment, still studying his face like she was trying to solve a puzzle. Then she asked in a voice almost too quiet to hear, "Are you my daddy? My real one?" The question hit Harrison like a physical blow. He looked at this child, this extraordinary child with blonde hair and blue eyes and a mind that worked faster than any 6-year-old should. He did the math quickly in his head. Almost 7 years old. 7 years since he'd last seen Sarah Anderson, the woman he'd dated seriously for 8 months before she'd abruptly left him without explanation, without warning, disappearing so completely he'd never been able to find her. 7 years. Sarah Anderson. A phone number listed as H. A child with his eyes. "I don't know," Harrison said honestly, his voice shaking slightly. "But I'm going to find out. Would you want me to be?" Chloe thought about this very seriously, her small face solemn. Then she said, "If you are, would you want to be? Or would you be mad that we exist?" The maturity of that question nearly broke him. How many times had this child heard adults express resentment about children existing? How many times had she internalized the message that she and her sisters were burdens rather than blessings? "Chloe," Harrison said carefully, reaching out to gently take her small bandaged hand. "If I'm your father, I would want to be. Very much. And I would never ever be mad that you exist, do you understand me?" Those blue eyes filled with tears again, but this time she was smiling. "Okay," she whispered. "Okay, Daddy." And just like that, in a hospital room in the middle of the night with 3 sleeping triplets nearby, Harrison Blake became a father. Not legally. Not biologically confirmed, but in the way that mattered most, in the eyes of a brave little girl who desperately needed someone to claim her. The question of whether he was ready for this, whether he wanted this, whether he could handle this level of responsibility, never even crossed his mind. That decision had been made the moment he'd heard her voice on the phone, the moment he'd chosen to come for her instead of sending his security team alone, the moment he'd descended into that flood to pull her into his arms. He was hers now, and she was his. Everything else was just details they'd have to figure out along the way. Marcus appeared in the doorway at 3 a.m, his expression grim. Chloe had fallen back asleep holding Harrison's hand, and the triplets were still unconscious in their sedated rest. Harrison carefully extracted his fingers from Chloe's grip and moved to the hallway, closing the door softly behind him. "Tell me you found Sarah," Harrison said immediately. "We found her," Marcus said slowly. "But you're not going to like this." Harrison's jaw tightened. "Where is she?" "Mercy General. She's been here the whole time. She was brought in 7 hours ago from the same neighborhood, found unconscious in the water. She hit her head on something during the flood, severe concussion, nearly drowned. She's in the ICU 2 floors up. She woke up an hour ago and the first thing she did was start screaming about her daughters. The nurses had to sedate her because she was trying to rip out her IV and go looking for them. Relief and anger warred in Harrison's chest. "Take me to her. Now." "There's more," Marcus said quietly. "I ran a background check like you asked. Harrison, Sarah Anderson has been living in poverty for the past 6.5 years. Government assistance, food banks, charity programs. She works 3 part-time jobs: house cleaning, waitressing, night shifts at a laundromat. She's been doing it alone. There's no father listed on any of the birth certificates. 4 children," Harrison said slowly. "She's been raising 4 children alone on minimum wage jobs for 6.5 years? The triplets are 3.5, Marcus corrected. So she's been doing it with 4 children for 3.5 years. Before that, it was just Chloe. But yes, alone. No child support, no family support that we can find. Her parents died in a car accident 8 years ago. No siblings. She's been completely on her own." Harrison felt something cold settle in his stomach. "Show me her medical records. All of them." Marcus hesitated. "That's illegal without her permission." "I don't care, show me." 10 minutes later, Harrison stood in Marcus's temporary office in the hospital, staring at a screen full of medical records that made his blood boil. Sarah had given birth to Chloe almost 7 years ago at this same hospital. A difficult labor, complications, no father present. She'd listed unknown on the birth certificate for paternal information. 3 years later, she'd given birth to the triplets at a free clinic in the worst part of town. Premature, underweight, emergency C-section performed by a doctor who probably had more patients than he could handle. And then the follow-up visits for all 4 girls. Everyone at free clinics or through charity programs. Vaccinations behind schedule because she couldn't afford them all at once. Well-child checks showing consistent malnutrition, nothing severe enough to trigger mandatory reporting, but enough to paint a clear picture of a family barely surviving. Emergency room visits for Chloe at age 4 with a broken arm. Sarah claiming she fell off a chair, but the notes suggesting the doctor suspected abuse or neglect, though nothing was ever proven or reported. She's been 1 bad month away from losing those children to the system for years, Marcus said quietly. 1 missed rent payment, 1 too obvious sign of malnutrition, 1 CPS visit at the wrong time. She's been walking a tightrope and somehow she's managed to keep them all together and keep them all alive. "Take me to her," Harrison said, his voice cold and hard. "Right now." Sarah Anderson looked worse than Harrison remembered and simultaneously exactly the same. 7 years had not been kind to her. She was thinner, harder, with lines on her face that hadn't been there when she was 23, and working as a paralegal at a law firm where they'd met. Her blonde hair was tangled and damp, matted with blood on one side where she'd hit her head. She had a tube in her arm and monitors beeping around her, and her eyes were closed when Harrison entered the ICU room. But when he closed the door with a decisive click, those eyes opened immediately. Green eyes that widened in shock, then narrowed in something that looked like panic and grief and resignation all at once. "Harrison," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "Oh God, how did you find me?" "Your daughter called me," Harrison said coldly, staying by the door, not trusting himself to get closer. "Your almost 7-year-old daughter built a raft out of bamboo poles and saved her 3 younger sisters from drowning, then called my personal cell phone and asked me to save them. Want to explain how that's possible, Sarah? Want to explain why you have my number programmed into your phone after almost 7 years of complete silence?" Sarah's face crumpled and tears started streaming down her cheeks. "Are they alive? Please tell me they're alive. Please tell me Chloe got them out. I couldn't get back to them. The water came so fast. And I tried. I swear I tried, but I couldn't." "They're alive," Harrison interrupted, his voice slightly gentler despite his anger. "All 4 of them. Chloe's been treated for severe hypothermia and malnutrition. The triplets are fine. They're 3 floors down, sleeping, safe. Now answer my question. Why do you have my number?" Sarah was crying harder now, her whole body shaking with sobs that looked painful given her injuries. "I never deleted it," she gasped. "When I left you 7 years ago, I couldn't bring myself to delete your number. I transferred it to every new phone I got, every time I had to replace a broken one. I kept telling myself I'd call someday, that I'd find the courage. 2 months ago, I almost did it. I sat staring at your name for an hour, crying, trying to make myself press the button. But I couldn't. I was too scared. Tell me what truth, Harrison demanded, though he already knew, had known since Chloe asked him if he was her daddy. Is Chloe mine, Sarah? Is she my daughter? Yes, Sarah whispered, and the word hung in the air between them like a detonation. Yes, Chloe is yours. I was pregnant when I left you. I didn't know it yet. Found out about 2 weeks after I disappeared. I was going to tell you. I swear I was going to come back and tell you. But then, her voice broke. Then everything fell apart and I couldn't. Explain, Harrison said flatly. Sarah took a shuddering breath, tears still streaming down her face. The day after I found out I was pregnant, I went to your office. I was going to tell you. I was terrified, but I was going to do it. But you were in a meeting, so I waited in your office. And while I was waiting, I saw documents on your desk. Your lawyer had left them there, the prenuptial agreement he was drafting in case we got married. Harrison felt ice form in his stomach. He remembered those documents vaguely. His lawyers had drafted them without his input, standard procedure for a man of his wealth. I read it, Sarah continued, her voice shaking. I know I shouldn't have. It was private. But I was pregnant and scared, and I saw my name on the papers and I read it. Harrison had said that any children would require immediate paternity testing. That child support would be minimal and calculated to provide basic necessities only. That I would have no claim to your assets or your life. It laid out exactly how little you wanted to be involved if we had children. I never saw that document, Harrison said, his voice rough. My lawyers drafted it. I never approved that language. But you didn't reject it either, Sarah said quietly. It was sitting on your desk ready to be discussed. And I realized something in that moment. You didn't want children. You'd told me that when we first started dating. But I'd hoped you'd change your mind. But seeing it in writing, seeing how thoroughly you'd planned to minimize your involvement if it happened anyway, I couldn't do it. I couldn't tell you about the baby and watch you resent us both. So I left. You should have told me, Harrison said, though his voice had lost some of its edge. Regardless of what those papers said, regardless of what you thought I might do, you should have told me. I had a right to know. She had a right to know me. I know, Sarah whispered. I know, and I'm sorry. I'm so sorry, Harrison. I've been sorry every day for almost 7 years. If I could go back and change it, I would, but I can't. All I can do is beg you to forgive me and ask you to please don't take her away from me. She's everything I have. All 4 of them are everything I have. The triplets aren't mine, Harrison said flatly. You understand that, right? Biologically, they're not my responsibility. Sarah nodded miserably. I know. And I would never ask you to. But Chloe loves them, Harrison interrupted. I can see it. She risked her life to save them. She built a raft for them. She called them her sisters without any distinction between biological and not. To her, they're a unit. They're family. They are family, Sarah said fiercely. Blood doesn't matter. Those girls are sisters in every way that counts. Harrison was quiet for a long moment, processing everything. Then he said something that surprised even himself. I'm going to need a paternity test. For legal purposes. For certainty. But Sarah, I already know the answer. I can see it in Chloe's face. She has my eyes. My mother's eyes. There's no doubt in my mind that she's mine. What are you going to do? Sarah asked, her voice small and terrified. I don't know yet, Harrison admitted. But right now, all 4 of those girls are sleeping 3 floors down, and they're safe, and they're cared for. Right now, that's all that matters. Tomorrow we'll figure out the rest. Tomorrow we'll deal with lawyers and custody and child services and all the complicated legal hell we're about to wade into. But tonight, Sarah, tonight I'm just going to sit with my daughter and make sure she knows that somebody came when she called. That somebody heard her and showed up and isn't going to leave. Sarah started crying again, but this time it was different. Relief and gratitude and grief all mixed together. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for saving them. Thank you for coming. I know I don't deserve your kindness after what I did, but thank you. Harrison didn't respond to that. He turned and left the ICU room, his mind spinning with everything he'd learned. Chloe was his daughter. He was a father. He had an almost 7-year-old child who'd been living in poverty while he'd been building his empire and living in luxury, completely oblivious to her existence. And 3 other little girls, Maya, Ruby, and Iris, who weren't his blood but who were loved by his daughter. 3 little girls who'd also been abandoned by their biological father. 3 little girls who were now tangled up in this impossibly complicated situation. When Harrison returned to the room where all 4 girls were sleeping, Chloe's eyes opened immediately. It was like she'd been waiting for him, listening for his footsteps. "Did you find her?" Chloe whispered. "Did you find my mommy?" "I found her," Harrison confirmed, sitting down in the chair beside her bed again. "She's here in the hospital. She got hurt in the flood, but she's going to be okay. She's been trying to get back to you this whole time." Chloe's face flooded with relief so intense it was painful to witness. "Can I see her?" "Tomorrow," Harrison promised. "When the doctors say it's safe for her to move and safe for you to walk, but Chloe, she and I need to talk about some important things. About your family. About the truth." Those intelligent blue eyes studied him carefully. "She told you, didn't she? That you're my daddy for real?" Harrison nodded slowly. "Yes. She told me. Are you mad?" "I'm not mad at you," Harrison said carefully. "I could never be mad at you. But yes, I'm upset that I didn't know. That I missed almost 7 years of your life. That you've been struggling and I wasn't there to help." Chloe was quiet for a moment. Then she said in a small voice, "Are you going to take me away from Mommy? Some kids at school, their daddies took them away when their parents weren't married. And Mommy and me, we don't have a lot of money. And you look like you have a lot of money." The fear in her voice broke Harrison's heart. "I'm not going to take you away from your mother," he said firmly. "But we do need to figure out how to make things better for all of you. How to make sure you have enough food and a safe place to live and all the things you deserve. That's going to require some big changes. Can you handle big changes?" "I can handle anything," Chloe said with the confidence of someone who'd already proven it beyond doubt. "As long as Mommy and my sisters are okay, as long as we're together." "Even if that means getting to know me?" Harrison asked. "Even if that means having a daddy in your life who wants to be part of your world?" Chloe smiled then, a real smile that transformed her entire face. "Especially that," she whispered. "I always wanted a daddy. And you came when I called. That's how I know you're a good one." Harrison felt his throat tighten with emotion he rarely allowed himself to feel. "I came when you called," he repeated softly. "And I'm going to keep coming, Chloe. Every time you need me. Every time you call. I promise you that." "What about Maya and Ruby and Iris?" Chloe asked, glancing over at her sleeping sisters. "They don't have a daddy either. Their daddy left before they were even born. Will you be their daddy too?" It was the question Harrison had been dreading and expecting in equal measure. 3 little girls who weren't his. 3 little girls who'd been abandoned just like Chloe had been, though for different reasons. 3 little girls who came as a package deal with the daughter he'd just discovered. The logical answer was no. The smart answer was no. The answer that protected his heart and his life and his freedom was absolutely no. But Harrison looked at Chloe's hopeful face, at the way she'd already positioned herself as protector of those 3 smaller children, at the love that shone in her eyes when she looked at her sisters, and he thought about how she'd called them her sisters without any distinction, how she'd risked everything to save them. "We'll figure it out," he said finally, "one step at a time. Right now they're safe. Right now you're all together. Let's start there and see what happens next." It wasn't a yes, but it wasn't a no either. And for tonight, in this hospital room with his newly discovered daughter and her triplet sisters, that was enough. The morning after the flood brought complications Harrison hadn't anticipated. By 8 a.m., his phone was ringing nonstop, his board of directors demanding to know why he'd disappeared in the middle of a crucial merger negotiation, business partners questioning his priorities, and worst of all, the media had somehow gotten wind that billionaire Harrison Blake had personally rescued 4 children from the Millbrook Heights disaster. By noon there were news vans outside Mercy General Hospital, Reporters shouting questions, cameras trying to catch glimpses through windows. "Mr. Blake, is it true you have a secret daughter?" One reporter yelled as Marcus tried to clear a path through the lobby. "Harrison, how long have you known about these children?" Another called out. "Are you planning to take custody? What about the mother?" Harrison ignored all of it, his jaw tight with barely controlled rage. This was exactly what Chloe and her sisters didn't need. Their private trauma turned into a media circus. He'd called his legal team at 6 a.m. and had them working on emergency protection orders, injunctions against the press, anything to create a barrier between his newly discovered family and the vultures circling for a story. But the real problem came at 10:30, when a woman in a crisp gray suit appeared in the hospital corridor with identification that made Harrison's blood run cold. Child Protective Services. "Mr. Blake," the woman said, her voice professionally neutral. "I'm Janet Morrison, caseworker with CPS. I need to speak with you about the Anderson children." They moved to a private conference room that the hospital administrator had hastily cleared for them. Janet Morrison was in her mid-40s, with sharp eyes that had clearly seen too much suffering and not enough justice. She laid out a folder on the table between them with the careful precision of someone preparing for battle. "I've reviewed the medical reports for all 4 children," she began without preamble. "Chronic malnutrition, inadequate preventive care, evidence of long-term poverty and neglect. The oldest child, Chloe, shows signs of parentification, being forced to take on adult responsibilities inappropriately. Under normal circumstances, this would trigger an immediate investigation and potential removal from the home." "Under normal circumstances," Harrison repeated carefully. These children wouldn't have just survived a natural disaster and been reunited with their mother after a traumatic separation. Under normal circumstances, you wouldn't be talking to a father who just discovered his daughter existed 24 hours ago. Janet's expression didn't change. "So you're confirming biological paternity of Chloe Anderson?" "Pending DNA testing, yes, but I have no doubt she's mine." "And the triplets?" "Are not biologically mine," Harrison admitted. "Their father abandoned them before birth. But they're Chloe's sisters and she loves them. That makes them my concern." "Your concern is not the same as legal responsibility, Mr. Blake." Janet opened the folder, revealing photographs that made Harrison's stomach turn. Pictures of the Anderson family's home taken before the flood. A cramped 2-bedroom apartment with peeling paint and visible mold. A refrigerator containing almost nothing. Children's clothes that were clearly too small and worn thin. Sarah Anderson has been failing to provide adequate care for these children for years. The fact that she's your ex-girlfriend and the mother of your child doesn't change that reality. "She's been doing it alone," Harrison said, his voice hard. "On minimum-wage jobs with no support system. She's been fighting to keep those girls together and fed and alive, and she succeeded against impossible odds. That's not failure, that's heroism." "It's also neglect by legal definition," Janet countered. "And now we have a situation where the biological mother is hospitalized, unable to care for the children. The biological father of one child has just appeared, but has no established relationship with any of them. And 3 children have no legal guardian at all. This is exactly the kind of situation that requires CPS intervention." Harrison leaned forward, his eyes cold. "Let me be very clear about something, Ms. Morrison. Those 4 little girls have been through hell in the past 24 hours. They've survived a flood, been separated from their mother, been treated for injuries and hypothermia. The absolute last thing they need right now is to be torn away from each other and placed in foster care with strangers. That would be re-traumatizing them when they're at their most vulnerable." "And keeping them with a mother who can't provide for them isn't traumatic?" Janet challenged. "Mr. Blake, I understand you want to help. But you can't just throw money at this situation and make the problems disappear. There are legal processes. There are regulations designed to protect children. Then let's talk about how to follow those processes while keeping the children's best interests at the center," Harrison said firmly. "Sarah is their mother. She loves them. She's made mistakes born from desperation, not malice. Give her a chance to fix this with proper support. Give me a chance to step up as Chloe's father and help provide for all of them." Janet was quiet for a long moment, studying him with those sharp, assessing eyes. "You have no experience with children. No established home suitable for 4 young girls. No child care plan? No understanding of what you're actually volunteering for? No, Harrison agreed. I don't. But I have resources. I have the ability to provide them with everything they need materially. And more importantly, I have the will to learn. I came when Chloe called me. I pulled her out of that flood. I'm not going to abandon her now just because the situation is complicated. What about when the media attention dies down? Janet pressed. What about when being a father to 4 young children interferes with your billion-dollar business? What about when you realize this isn't a temporary project you can delegate to staff? Those are fair questions, Harrison admitted, and I don't have all the answers yet. But I do know this. Chloe is my daughter. I missed almost 7 years of her life through no fault of my own. I'm not missing another day. And the triplets are part of her life, which means they're part of mine. I'm not looking for easy, Ms. Morrison. I'm looking for right. Janet studied him for another long moment, then sighed and closed the folder. I'm going to recommend supervised reunification, she said finally. Sarah remains the primary custodian, but with mandatory services, parenting classes, financial counseling, regular home visits. You establish legal paternity and work out a custody agreement for Chloe. The triplets remain with Sarah unless she proves unable to care for them, at which point we revisit placement options. And if I want to help support all 4 children, Harrison asked, even though 3 aren't legally my responsibility? That's between you and Sarah to work out. But Mr. Blake, Janet's voice softened slightly, make sure you're doing this for the right reasons. Children aren't projects, they're not PR opportunities. They're human beings who've already been hurt by the adults in their lives. If you're going to be in their world, you need to be all in. No halfway measures. No backing out when it gets hard. I understand, Harrison said quietly. And I am all in. After Janet left, Harrison returned to the children's room to find chaos. Chloe was sitting up in bed, her face pale with anger and fear. The triplets were crying. And Sarah, who apparently had checked herself out of the ICU against medical advice, was standing in the middle of the room in a hospital gown and robe, arguing with 2 nurses who were trying to convince her to return to her room. I'm not leaving my daughters, Sarah was saying, her voice shaking but determined. You can't make me leave them. Mom, Chloe called out, her voice breaking with relief. You're okay. Sarah's head whipped around, and when she saw Chloe awake and alert, she burst into tears. She tried to move toward the bed and stumbled, still weak from her injuries. Harrison moved instinctively, catching her before she fell, and for a moment they were frozen there, the 3 of them in a strange tableau of the family they'd never been. I've got you, Harrison said quietly, helping Sarah to the chair beside Chloe's bed. But the nurses are right. You need to be in bed recovering, not pushing yourself like this. I needed to see them, Sarah said through tears, reaching out to touch Chloe's face with trembling fingers. I needed to see that they were really okay. Baby, I'm so sorry I couldn't get back to you. I couldn't. I tried so hard. It's okay, Mommy, Chloe said, leaning into her mother's touch with the desperate need of a child who'd been too scared for too long. We're okay. The man came. He saved us. The man is your father, Sarah said softly, looking at Harrison with eyes full of complicated emotions. His name is Harrison, and he's your daddy, sweetheart. Your real daddy. Chloe looked between them, her expression serious. I know. He told me. And I told him it was okay to be my daddy if he wanted to be. Did you now? Sarah said with a watery laugh. Just like that? You just decided? Just like that, Chloe confirmed with the supreme confidence of an almost 7-year-old who'd already saved 3 lives and survived a flood. He came when I called. That means he's a good daddy, the kind that stays. The simple logic of it hit both adults like a physical blow. Harrison felt something in his chest twist painfully at the implicit accusation. Chloe had been abandoned by one biological father and was now judging him based on whether he would stay or go. The bar was simultaneously impossibly high and devastatingly low. Just show up. Just stay. Just be there. I'm going to stay, Harrison said clearly, looking directly at Chloe. I promise you that. No matter how complicated things get, no matter how hard it is, I'm staying. One of the triplets, Maya, Harrison thought, though he was still learning to tell them apart, chose that moment to wake up and immediately started crying for her mother. Sarah instinctively tried to get up and Harrison gently pressed her back down. "Let me," he said. Sarah looked startled. "You don't have to. Let me try," Harrison said again. He moved to Maya's bed, looking down at the tiny girl in the pink bunny costume who was staring up at him with wide, frightened eyes. "Hey there, Maya, remember me? I'm the one who brought you up in the helicopter. Your sister Chloe called me to come help." Maya's crying quieted to sniffles as she studied him with the serious consideration of a 3-year-old trying to decide if this tall stranger was safe. Then she said in a tiny voice, "Mama?" "Mama's right here," Harrison said gently, carefully picking up the small girl. She was so light it shocked him. He carried her over to where Sarah sat and placed her in her mother's lap, watching as Sarah wrapped her arms around her daughter and buried her face in the child's hair. "See? Mama's here." "Thank you," Sarah whispered, and Harrison knew she wasn't just thanking him for bringing Maya over. The other 2 triplets woke up within minutes, and suddenly the room was full of small children needing attention, asking questions, wanting their mother. Harrison found himself helping in ways he never would have imagined 24 hours ago, fetching water, finding the nurses to ask about food, holding Ruby while Sarah checked Iris's bandages. The nurses who'd been trying to force Sarah back to her room gave up, and instead brought in a more comfortable chair and a wheelchair for her to use, clearly recognizing that they'd lost this battle. Dr. Chen appeared around noon with discharge papers for the children and orders for Sarah to return to the ICU. "The girls are medically cleared to leave," he said, his gaze moving between Harrison and Sarah with knowing eyes. "But they need follow-up appointments, proper nutrition, and a safe place to recover. Can you provide that?" "We don't have a home anymore," Sarah said quietly, her voice breaking. "The flood destroyed our apartment. Everything we owned is gone." "Then you'll stay with me," Harrison said before he could second-guess himself. "I have a penthouse in Manhattan with more than enough room. You can all stay there while we figure out the next steps." Sarah stared at him like he'd grown a second head. "Harrison, we can't just move into your penthouse. That's crazy. You don't even know these children. You don't know me anymore. Then we'll get to know each other," Harrison said firmly. "Sarah, you have 4 children who need care, no home, no resources, and you're still recovering from a head injury. I have space, resources, and a security team that can keep the media away while we sort this out. This isn't charity. This is me taking care of my daughter and helping the woman who raised her when I wasn't there to do it myself." "It's too much," Sarah protested weakly. "You're already doing too much." "It's not enough," Harrison countered. "It's nowhere near enough to make up for almost 7 years, but it's a start. So please let me help. Let me do this." Chloe, who'd been listening to the entire exchange with her characteristic intense focus, spoke up. "Mommy, I think we should go with Daddy. We don't have anywhere else to go. And he has a nice voice. People with nice voices are usually nice people." The childish logic made both adults smile despite the tension. Sarah looked at her daughter, then at Harrison, then back at Chloe again. "Are you sure, baby? You'd be okay living with someone you just met?" "I'm sure," Chloe said with absolute certainty. "He came in the flood. He came in the helicopter. He stayed all night while we were sleeping. That means he's safe. That means we can trust him." Out of the mouths of babes, Harrison thought. This almost 7-year-old had better instincts about trust and safety than most adults he knew. She'd survived by learning to read people, by understanding who would help and who would hurt. And she'd decided he was safe. He was determined not to prove her wrong. "Okay," Sarah said finally, tears streaming down her face again. "Okay. We'll accept your help. But Harrison, we need to talk about all of this. About Chloe, about what happened 7 years ago, about what happens next. We can't just pretend the past didn't happen." "We'll talk," Harrison agreed. "We'll talk about everything. But right now, let's just get you all somewhere safe and warm and fed. The rest can wait." By 3 p.m., Harrison's entire life had been turned upside down. His penthouse apartment, designed for a single man who rarely spent time there anyway, was suddenly full of children and noise and chaos. His executive team had worked around the clock to make it happen. Sarah had been given the master bedroom with strict orders to rest and a private nurse to monitor her recovery. The triplets were installed in the guest room with 3 toddler beds that had been assembled by a professional service in under 2 hours. And Chloe had her own room next to Harrison's, filled with stuffed animals and books and everything an almost 7-year-old girl could possibly want, all of it materialized through the efficiency of Harrison's staff. A full-time nanny had been hired, vetted, background checked, and highly recommended to help during the transition. A private chef was preparing child-friendly meals. A pediatrician was scheduled for tomorrow. Everything moved with the precision Harrison demanded in business, now applied to family. Chloe stood in the doorway of her new bedroom, staring at everything with wide eyes that were quickly filling with tears. "This is all for me," she whispered. "All for you," Harrison confirmed, crouching down to her level. "Do you like it?" "I've never had my own room before," Chloe said, her voice shaking. "I always shared with my sisters, and we never had this many books, or toys, or anything." Harrison felt his heart crack a little more. "Well, now you do. And Chloe, you don't have to share unless you want to. This is your space, your safe place." Chloe looked at him with those 2 old eyes, and then she asked the question that had clearly been weighing on her. "How long can we stay? When will we have to leave?" "You're not leaving," Harrison said firmly. "This is your home now for as long as you need it. Possibly forever if that's what ends up being best, but we're going to figure this out together, okay? You and me and your mom. We're going to make sure you're all taken care of." "Even Maya and Ruby and Iris?" Chloe pressed. "Even though they're not yours?" Harrison hesitated for only a moment before answering honestly. "I don't know yet what the long-term plan is for your sisters, but I promise you this. I will never separate you from them. If they're important to you, they're important to me. We'll figure it out together." It was the best answer he could give, and Chloe seemed to accept it. She moved into the room, running her small hands over the books, touching the stuffed animals gently as if afraid they might disappear. Then she turned back to Harrison and said something that made his breath catch in his throat. "Will you read to me tonight before bed? My mommy used to read to me every night, but she's been too tired lately. And I miss it." "I would love to," Harrison said, his voice rough with emotion he wasn't prepared for. "Pick out any book you want and I'll read it to you." Chloe smiled then, a real smile that lit up her entire face, and Harrison knew with absolute certainty that he'd made the right choice. Whatever complications lay ahead, whatever legal battles or media circuses or personal struggles waited in the future, this moment right here made all of it worthwhile. He was a father now, and he was going to do everything in his power to be the kind of father that Chloe, and maybe eventually her 3 little sisters, deserved. The first week in Harrison's penthouse was an adjustment period unlike anything he'd ever experienced. His carefully ordered life, built on schedules and efficiency and predictability, was completely demolished by the reality of 4 young children. The triplets woke up crying at various times throughout the night. Chloe had nightmares about the flood and would appear in Harrison's doorway at 3 a.m., asking if she could sleep on his floor because she was scared. Mealtimes became production numbers involving spilled juice, rejected vegetables, and complicated negotiations about what constituted acceptable food. Sarah tried to help despite her doctor's orders to rest, but she was still weak and in pain from her injuries. The nurse Harrison had hired monitored her recovery closely, and the nanny helped with the children, but Sarah bristled at having so much help, clearly uncomfortable with her sudden dependence on Harrison's resources. "I can take care of my own children," she snapped on the 3rd day, when the nanny tried to intervene in a tantrum Maya was throwing about bath time. "No one's saying you can't," Harrison said carefully. He was learning to navigate Sarah's pride, understanding that years of struggling alone had made her defensive about accepting help. "But you're recovering from a serious injury. Let people support you, that's what they're here for." "This isn't my life," Sarah said, gesturing at the luxury surrounding them. "This penthouse, the staff, the private chef, all of it. This isn't who we are." "Maybe it's not who you were," Harrison said, "but it could be who you become. You don't have to struggle anymore, Sarah. You don't have to do everything alone." "And what happens when you get tired of playing house?" Sarah challenged. When the reality of 4 children becomes inconvenient? When your business partners start questioning your priorities? We'll have gotten used to all this and then you'll take it away and it'll be even worse than before. I'm not going to take it away, Harrison said firmly. I made a promise to Chloe. I made a promise to myself. I'm not backing out. But Sarah's fears weren't entirely unfounded. By the end of the first week, the cracks were already showing. Harrison's business was suffering from his divided attention. He'd missed 3 important meetings, had been late to 2 conference calls, and had snapped at his CFO for the first time in their 10-year working relationship. His board of directors had called an emergency meeting to discuss his change in priorities, and the media speculation about his secret family was affecting Blake Industries' stock price. The breaking point came on day 8, when Harrison's business partner Marcus Chen, different from Marcus the security head, showed up at the penthouse unannounced at 7 in the morning, just as Harrison was trying to convince Ruby that yes, she did have to wear pants to breakfast. They were not optional. We need to talk, Marcus Chen said, his expression grim. The Singapore deal is falling apart. Lee Industries is threatening to pull out because you weren't at the negotiation yesterday. They think you're not serious about the partnership. I had a family emergency, Harrison said, holding Ruby, who was still protesting the pants situation. They'll understand. They don't understand. They think you've lost focus, and honestly, Harrison. Marcus looked around at the chaos of the penthouse, at the toys scattered everywhere and the sound of the other children in the background. They might have a point. This isn't you. You're a businessman, not a family man. You don't do domestic life. You've never wanted it. Things change, Harrison said tightly. Do they? Or are you just feeling guilty about missing almost 7 years of a kid's life and overcompensating? Marcus challenged. Because from where I'm standing, you're trying to be something you're not, and it's destroying the empire you spent 15 years building. The words hit harder than Harrison wanted to admit, because they echoed his own midnight doubts. The nights when he lay awake wondering if he was capable of this, if he was making a terrible mistake, if he was setting himself up for failure, and setting those children up for another abandonment. But then Chloe appeared in the doorway, still in her pajamas with her blonde hair tangled from sleep. Daddy, she said quietly, is everything okay? I heard loud voices. Everything in Harrison's chest settled at that word. Daddy, said with such trust, such certainty that he was safe and stable and someone she could depend on. Everything's fine, sweetheart, Harrison said gently, putting Ruby down and moving to Chloe. This is my business partner, Marcus. He just stopped by to talk about work. Why don't you go help the nanny get your sisters ready for breakfast? Chloe studied Marcus with those unnervingly intelligent eyes, then looked back at Harrison. You're not leaving, are you? For work? You said you'd take me to the park today. I'm not leaving, Harrison confirmed. We're going to the park just like I promised. Mr. Chen was just leaving. Marcus stared at Harrison like he didn't recognize him. You're canceling the emergency board meeting for a trip to the park? Yes, Harrison said simply. I am. The board meeting can be rescheduled. My daughter's first week in her new home and her first trip to a park with her father cannot. So yes, Marcus, the park takes priority. After Marcus left, clearly frustrated and concerned, Sarah appeared from where she'd obviously been listening. That was your business partner? The one who handles the Asian accounts worth hundreds of millions of dollars? That was him. And you just told him a park playdate was more important than an emergency board meeting. I did. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Harrison, you can't sacrifice everything for us. Your business, your career, your whole life. That's not sustainable. Eventually you'll resent us for it. Maybe, Harrison admitted. Or maybe I'll figure out how to balance both. But right now, in this moment, I need to show Chloe that when I make a promise, I keep it. I need her to learn that she can depend on me. The business will survive me taking a few days to get my life sorted out. But Chloe's trust? That's fragile, and I won't risk breaking it for any amount of money. Something in Sarah's expression shifted then. The defensive walls came down slightly and Harrison saw a vulnerability he hadn't seen since they were young and in love and everything seemed possible. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm sorry I kept her from you. I'm sorry you're having to choose between everything you built and a daughter you didn't know existed. I'm sorry I made such a mess of everything. We both made mistakes, Harrison said. You for not telling me. Me for being the kind of man who made you afraid to tell me. But we can't change the past, we can only fix the future. So let's focus on that. The park trip that afternoon was revelatory in ways Harrison hadn't expected. Watching Chloe on the swings, hearing her laugh for the first time since he'd met her, seeing her be a carefree, almost 7-year-old instead of a miniature adult carrying impossible responsibilities, it solidified everything for him. This was what mattered. This was what he'd been missing without knowing it was gone. But the triplets were a different challenge. Maya clung to Sarah's leg and refused to play. Ruby ran in 3 different directions at once and nearly gave Harrison a heart attack when she climbed to the top of a structure meant for older children. And Iris just sat in the sandbox, silent and watchful in a way that concerned him more than any tantrum could have. Iris doesn't talk much, Sarah explained quietly, sitting beside him on a bench while Chloe showed the triplets how to go down the slide. She's been evaluated, she's not on the spectrum, not delayed, just quiet. Like she's processing everything and deciding whether the world is safe enough to engage with. What happened to make her that way? Harrison asked. Sarah's face went tight with old pain. Derek, their father, he was kind at first. But when I got pregnant with the triplets, he changed, got angry, started drinking. He never hit them. They weren't born yet. But he hit me. Not often, just enough to keep me afraid. And I think somehow Iris knew. Even in the womb. I think she knew her father was angry and violent, and she's been protecting herself ever since. Harrison felt rage surge through him at the thought of anyone hurting Sarah, hurting his daughter's mother while she was pregnant. Where is he now, this Derek? I don't know and I don't care, Sarah said flatly. He signed away his parental rights when they were born, and I never heard from him again. For all I know, he's dead in a ditch somewhere. But those girls, her voice broke. They've never known their father. They've never had a man be gentle with them, be patient with them. They don't know how to trust. Harrison watched the triplets playing with Chloe, saw the way they stayed close to their big sister even while exploring the playground. 3 tiny girls who'd been abandoned before they were even born. 3 children who had no reason to believe any man would stay, would care, would choose them. And he made a decision that changed everything. I'm going to file for adoption, he said quietly, for all 3 of them. Sarah's head whipped around to stare at him. What? I'm going to adopt Maya, Ruby, and Iris, Harrison repeated, his voice firm with certainty. If you'll allow it, if you'll give me permission, I'm going to become their legal father. Harrison, you can't just decide to adopt 3 children after knowing them for a week, Sarah said, her voice shaking. That's insane. They're not puppies you bring home on a whim. They're human beings with needs and complications and they're Chloe's sisters, Harrison interrupted. And Chloe is my daughter. And I will not create a family where 1 child is chosen and 3 are tolerated. I will not be the man who loves his biological child, but treats the others as obligations. If I'm doing this, if I'm being a father, then I'm being a father to all of them. Equally. Completely. No distinctions. Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now. You don't know what you're signing up for. The triplets have issues. Maya has anxiety. Ruby has impulse control problems. Iris might not speak, but she has nightmares that make her scream for hours. They're not easy children. They're not the perfect family you could build if you started over with someone else. I don't want perfect, Harrison said, and realized he meant it completely. I want them. These specific children, this specific family, messy and complicated and real. That's what I want, Sarah, if you'll let me have it. Sarah was sobbing openly now, and Chloe noticed from the playground. She came running over, her face creased with worry. Mommy, are you okay? Did the man make you sad? The man has a name, Harrison said gently. And no, I didn't make her sad. I think I might have made her happy. But you should ask her. Chloe looked at her mother with those searching eyes. Mommy, he wants to adopt your sisters, Sarah choked out. He wants to be their daddy too. All of them. Not just you. Chloe's eyes went wide. She looked at Harrison with an expression so full of hope and joy and disbelief that Harrison felt his throat tighten. Really? You'd be daddy to all of us? Even though Maya and Ruby and Iris aren't yours? Really, Harrison confirmed. If that's okay with you? If you want to share? Chloe launched herself at Harrison with so much force she nearly knocked him off the bench. She wrapped her small arms around his neck and held on like she'd never let go. And Harrison heard her whisper against his shoulder, "I knew you were a good daddy. I knew it when you came in the flood. Good daddies don't leave anyone behind." And just like that, with an almost 7-year-old's simple wisdom, Chloe had defined exactly what kind of father Harrison was determined to be. The kind who didn't leave anyone behind. Not his biological daughter, not the 3 little girls who needed a father just as desperately. Not the woman who'd raised all of them alone when she shouldn't have had to. He was all in. No halfway measures. No backing out when it got hard. He was going to be the father these 4 girls deserved. Or he'd die trying. 3 months later, Harrison stood in family court watching Judge Patricia Morrison review the adoption papers for Maya, Ruby, and Iris Anderson. The courtroom was surprisingly small and informal compared to the corporate legal battles he was used to. Sarah sat beside him, holding Chloe's hand. The triplets were in the gallery with the nanny, too young to fully understand what was happening but dressed in matching dresses that Harrison had let them pick out themselves. Pink, yellow, and purple, naturally. The past 3 months had been the hardest and best of Harrison's entire life. He'd restructured his entire company, promoting key executives to handle day-to-day operations while he took a step back to focus on his family. The board had initially resisted until Harrison made it clear he was willing to resign as CEO entirely if they couldn't accommodate his new priorities. They'd accommodated. Blake Industries' stock price had taken a hit, but it had recovered as the media narrative shifted from billionaire's secret scandal to businessman becomes devoted father. But the real work had been at home, learning to be a father to 4 children with very different needs. Chloe was easy in some ways. She was smart and adaptable and desperate for his attention and approval. But she also carried the weight of having been the parentified child for too long, and Harrison had to constantly remind her that she didn't have to take care of everyone anymore, that it was okay to just be almost 7 years old. The triplets were harder. Maya's anxiety manifested in clinginess and frequent meltdowns. Ruby's impulsivity led to constant minor disasters and injuries that gave Harrison premature gray hair. And Iris was the puzzle that broke his heart daily. She still rarely spoke, but she'd started leaving him little drawings, little tokens of trust. A picture of a stick figure man holding hands with 4 little girls, a flower she'd picked from the park, her favorite stuffed unicorn placed in his office chair like an offering. 3 weeks ago, Iris had called him Daddy for the first time. Just once, quietly when he was tucking her into bed. Harrison had cried in his bedroom afterward, overwhelmed by the trust inherent in that single word from a child who gave her words so carefully. Now Judge Morrison looked up from the papers, her expression neutral. "Mr. Blake, do you understand that adoption is permanent? That you're taking on full legal and financial responsibility for 3 children who are not biologically related to you?" "I understand completely, Your Honor," Harrison said clearly. "And you understand that these children come with challenges? They've experienced trauma, abandonment, and instability. This won't be easy." "I understand. And I'm prepared for it. I want this, Your Honor. I want to be their father." Judge Morrison turned to Sarah. "Ms. Anderson, you're consenting to this adoption? You understand you're giving Mr. Blake equal parental rights to your daughters?" "I do," Sarah said, her voice steady despite the tears on her face. "Harrison has proven himself over and over in the past 3 months. He's been patient and present and loving. My daughters need a father, and he's already become that to them. I trust him with their lives." The judge was quiet for a long moment, her eyes moving between Harrison and Sarah, then to the 4 little girls in the courtroom. "This is highly unusual," she said finally. "A single man adopting 3 children who aren't biologically his while also establishing paternity of a 4th. The court generally prefers married couples for adoptions." Harrison's stomach dropped. They'd known this might be an issue. But the lawyer had assured them that Harrison's resources and the unique circumstances would overcome any objections. However, Judge Morrison continued, I've reviewed the home study reports, the psychologist evaluations, the references from the children's doctors and teachers. Every single report indicates that these children are thriving in your care, Mr. Blake. They're healthy, happy, attending a good school, receiving therapy to process their trauma. Chloe's grades have improved dramatically. Maya's anxiety has decreased. Ruby is learning impulse control. And Iris, the judge smiled slightly. Iris apparently drew a picture of her family that her therapist says shows a secure attachment to you. Harrison felt hope surge in his chest. So despite the unusual circumstances, Judge Morrison said, picking up her gavel, I'm granting this adoption. Maya, Ruby, and Iris Anderson will legally become Maya, Ruby, and Iris Blake, with full parental rights granted to Harrison Blake and Sarah Anderson. Congratulations to all of you on your new family. The gavel came down, and Harrison felt his entire world shift and settle into place. He was a father, legally, officially, permanently. Not just to Chloe, though the paternity test had confirmed what he'd known from the start. She was his daughter. But to all 4 girls, to a ready-made family that had appeared in his life through a desperate phone call in the middle of a flood. Sarah was crying openly, and Chloe was bouncing with excitement. The nanny brought the triplets forward, and Maya threw herself at Harrison while Ruby did a little dance, and Iris, precious, quiet Iris, looked up at him and said clearly, Daddy, you're my daddy now. I'm your daddy now, Harrison confirmed, scooping her up along with Maya while Ruby demanded to be picked up too. He managed to hold all 3 triplets while Chloe wrapped herself around his leg, and he stood there in the middle of family court, covered in daughters, and felt more successful than any business deal had ever made him feel. Later that evening, after a celebration dinner and cake and letting the girls stay up past their bedtime, Harrison found himself in Chloe's room for their nightly reading ritual. She'd picked out Charlotte's Web this week, and they were halfway through. But tonight, before he could start reading, Chloe looked at him with those serious blue eyes and asked a question he knew had been building. Daddy, are you and Mommy going to get married? Harrison carefully marked their place in the book. Why do you ask that? Because families usually have a mommy and a daddy who are married, Chloe said with the logic of someone who'd been thinking about this extensively. And we're a family now, so I thought maybe you would get married. Then we'd be a real family. We're already a real family, Harrison said gently. Marriage doesn't determine that. Love does. Commitment does. And your mom and I are both committed to you and your sisters. But do you love her? Chloe pressed. The way daddies love mommies in stories? Harrison hesitated, choosing his words carefully. Your mom and I have a complicated history. We cared about each other very much once, a long time ago. And I respect her, and I'm grateful to her for raising you to be so incredible. But love, the kind you're talking about, that's something that would need to grow again. We'd need to get to know each other as the people we are now, not who we were 7 years ago. So maybe someday? Chloe asked hopefully. Maybe someday, Harrison agreed. Would you like that, if your mom and I got back together? Chloe thought about it with her characteristic seriousness. I think I would, because then you'd be here all the time, not just visiting, and maybe we could be a normal family like other kids have, with 1 house and 2 parents and everyone together. Harrison pulled her close, this daughter who'd had to grow up too fast and who just wanted the simple security of a stable family. We'll see what happens. But Chloe, even if your mom and I never get married, even if we end up living in different houses someday, you and your sisters will always be my daughters. That never changes. Adoption is forever. I'm your daddy forever. Do you understand? Forever, forever? Chloe asked. Even when I'm grown up? Forever, forever, Harrison confirmed. Even when you're grown up and have kids of your own. Even when I'm old and gray. Even when we disagree or fight or things are hard. I'm yours and you're mine, and that's permanent. That's what being family means. Chloe snuggled against him, satisfied with this answer. Okay, but I still think you should marry Mommy. She looks at you sometimes when you're playing with us, and her face gets soft. I think she might still love you. The real kind of love. Harrison's heart stuttered at that observation from his too perceptive daughter. He'd noticed the same thing, moments when Sarah's guard would drop and he'd catch an expression on her face that reminded him of the young woman he'd fallen in love with 7 years ago. Moments when she'd laugh at something he said and he'd feel that old connection spark between them. But he'd been afraid to acknowledge it, afraid to hope for something that might complicate an already complex situation. "We'll see," he said again, pressing a kiss to Chloe's forehead. "Now let's get back to Charlotte and Wilbur." We left off at a very important part. After Chloe fell asleep, Harrison found Sarah in the kitchen making tea. Over the past 3 months, they'd fallen into routines of shared custody, even while living in the same penthouse. She had her space, he had his, and they came together for the children. It was working, but it was also carefully maintained distance, both of them afraid to push for more and risk disrupting what they'd built. "The girls are all asleep," Harrison said, pouring himself a cup of coffee from the always full pot he'd installed. "Today was big for them, for all of us." "You're officially a father of 4, Sarah said with a soft smile. "How does it feel?" "Terrifying and perfect in equal measure," Harrison admitted. "I keep waiting for someone to tell me I'm not qualified for this, that I've made a terrible mistake. But then one of them laughs or does something amazing or calls me daddy, and I think maybe I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be." "You are," Sarah said quietly. "Harrison, I need to say something I should have said 3 months ago. Thank you. Thank you for coming when Chloe called. Thank you for not turning us away when you found out the truth. Thank you for choosing all 4 girls when you had every right to only claim Chloe. You've given my daughters something I could never give them alone: security, stability, a father who genuinely wants them. That's a gift beyond price." "You gave them something more important," Harrison countered. "You gave them unconditional love. You sacrificed everything to keep them together and keep them safe. You survived impossible odds with grace and strength. I have resources, Sarah, but you have heart. They need both." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, and then Sarah said something that changed everything again. "Chloe asked me today if we were going to get married. She apparently asked you too." Harrison's hand tightened on his coffee cup. "She did, very directly. I gave her the diplomatic answer." "What's the undiplomatic answer?" Sarah asked, her voice carefully neutral. Harrison set down his cup and turned to face her fully. "The undiplomatic answer is that I think about it constantly. I think about what we had 7 years ago and what we could have now. I think about the fact that we're good partners in parenting, that we balance each other well, that the girls are happiest when we're both present. But I also think about how badly we hurt each other, how much trust we broke, how complicated it would be to add romance to an already complex situation." Sarah nodded slowly. "I think about it too. I think about how you're the only man I've ever truly loved. How Derek was a mistake I made out of loneliness, trying to replace something I'd thrown away. I think about how you've become the man I always hoped you'd be, present, engaged, emotionally available. But I'm also terrified that if we tried again and it didn't work, we'd destroy this careful co-parenting relationship we've built. So we're both too scared to risk it," Harrison said. "Apparently," Sarah agreed. Harrison made a decision then, one that required the same courage it had taken to adopt 3 children who weren't biologically his. What if we weren't scared? What if we decided that what we have is worth risking everything for? Sarah's eyes widened. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying let's try again. Really try. Not just for the girls, but for us. Let's date. Let's remember why we fell in love in the first place and see if those people still exist under all the hurt and complications. And if it works," Harrison took a breath, "if it works, then we build the life Chloe wants. 1 house, 2 parents, a real family in every sense of the word." "And if it doesn't work," Sarah whispered, "then we go back to being co-parents and friends and we don't let it affect the girls. We're adults. We can handle our own disappointment." "But Sarah," Harrison reached out and took her hand, feeling the same electric connection he'd felt 7 years ago. "I don't think it won't work. I think we're being given a second chance that most people never get. And I think we'd be fools not to take it. Sarah looked down at their joined hands, and when she looked back up, her eyes were shining with tears and hope. Okay, she said. Okay, let's try. Let's see if we can build something real out of all this chaos. Harrison pulled her close, and Sarah came willingly, melting into his embrace like coming home. They stood there in the kitchen of his penthouse, holding each other while their 4 daughters slept safely in nearby rooms, and Harrison felt the last piece of his life click into place. He'd built an empire worth billions. He'd made his fortune and his reputation and his mark on the world. But this makeshift family created from disaster and second chances, this was his greatest achievement. 4 daughters who called him daddy, a woman he'd lost and found again, a life that was messy and complicated and absolutely perfect. 6 months later, they'd make it official. A wedding in the backyard of the house they'd bought together in Connecticut, big enough for 4 growing girls and far enough from the city to give them privacy. Chloe would be the flower girl, insisting on wearing her pink hoodie under her dress because it was her good luck charm, the one she'd been wearing when she called her daddy to save them. The triplets would be junior bridesmaids in pink, yellow, and purple. And Iris would speak her first full sentence to Harrison right before he walked down the aisle. I'm glad you came in the flood, Daddy. But that was still in the future. Right now, in this moment, Harrison just held Sarah and thought about how a single phone call, a desperate little voice saying, Daddy, we're in the flood, had changed everything. He'd come when called. He'd pulled them from the water. And in saving them, he'd somehow saved himself. Given himself permission to want something more than business success. Given himself the family he'd never known he needed. The flood had taken their old lives and washed them away. But from those waters, they'd built something new, something stronger, something that would last forever. A family. His family. Finally and completely his.